Good morning, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to do this. This is the third time that I've presented Tampa Scorecard. And for anybody watching, if you like what's presented, thanks City Council for allowing me to present it. If you don't like it, just blame me. Dr. Shivandu should be online. Is he on? Dr. Shivandu is a professor from USF. He's one of their top economists, but he's one of their top data analytics people and does predictive analytics. And you all may remember that when we first put this together, we had consultants from Florida Chamber Foundation, their economist, Bieber at University of Florida, and especially USF, and Dr. Moaz Limiyam, who was the Dean of the College of Business at USF, was a big help to us. And now he's the president of the University of North Florida, and he's still helping us, and he says hello to everybody, sends his greetings. He provided Dr. Shivandu, who has also looked through this, and he should be online soon, and he'll help us answer questions at the end. Also, I have Alex Frey, who was an intern here a couple years ago for one of our previous colleagues, was an economics major at USF. Now he's at University of North Carolina getting his PhD. He helped us put together this, as well as Jason Marlowe, my former legislative aide.
Good morning, Bill. I'm here.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for your help. So the first thing we put on the slides is what gets measured gets done. You all know if you measure something and you follow it, it gets done, right? And if you look at I like to compare this to the capital markets. If you look at companies, if anybody invests in stock, there are a standard set of metrics that you look at. You look at whether a company's profitable or not. You look at the stock value. You look at other key metrics. And those metrics are measured by accounting standards and also by the SEC standards and other laws. For cities, there's no standard like that. And so cities can measure whatever they want. And so you can pick anything you want to say you're doing a good job, or somebody can pick whatever they want to show that you're doing a bad job. So what we did was we looked at the best cities in the world to look at how they measure themselves. Before I get to that, I just want to talk about leadership for a second. There's a professor, Ron Heifetz, from the Kennedy School, and he said, what people resist is not change per se, but loss. Progress on problems is the measure of leadership. Leaders mobilize people to face problems, and communities make progress on problems because leaders challenge them and help them to do so. An example is our colleague, Mr. Vieira, Councilmember Vieira, has pushed us for the last few years to look at public safety. We know that we need more fire stations. We know that we need more ambulances and others. That's an issue that's a life or death issue. It's an important issue for our community. Every one of us has led on different issues. It happens to be that economics and economic development is in my background, and so this is something I'm interested in. The difference is that a charismatic leader can come in and say, everything's fine, everything's great, and you can only look at the things that you see. And that has a great purpose. You need to be able to look at the positive things, but you also need to be able to look at the negative. And out of 10 things, if 5 are great, you need to build on those, and if 5 are not great, you need to repair them. There's a thing called vanity rankings, and these are used in publicity all the time. And of course, city PR people would send this out. There's nothing wrong with it because you want to promote your city. We're all boosters of our city. We probably have promoted these on our social media accounts. Things like where Tampa is #1 for best women to start a business. We're in the top 25 cities for millennials. Ranked #3 for cities where people want to move. These could be good or bad depending on your perspective, but these are kinds of things that are promoted. The difference is that vanity rankings are done by magazines and online websites that want to promote themselves. So when they create a list, they get publicity in each of the cities that they write about. And most often they're using regional data, not city data. Because we are part of a region, Tampa Bay, or the MSA, Tampa, St. Petersburg, Clearwater area, typically it gets measured differently. So this is a list a recent one that has gone out. We're one of the top 10 metros for people coming into the city, and that's promoted as Tampa is one of the top places that people want to move to. This is the actual chart from the website where this came from. This is the most recent vanity ranking that we promoted. Again, nothing wrong with promoting it. The difference is if you look at the top left, it says Metro. It's MSA. It's not Tampa. It says Tampa in the ranking because just like Atlanta, they'll list Atlanta or Orlando. They don't say Orlando metro area, Atlanta metro area. They don't, and a lot of times when they say Miami, they're even including Fort Lauderdale. This is not the city. If you're looking at a company, companies have holding companies and they have businesses, SBUs or business units underneath them. You need to understand if you have a picture of the whole company, you need to also know what the business units are looking like. And so what we wanted to do is look at that. We researched how the best cities in the world measure themselves, and create a list of key metrics. So we looked at all the best cities and looked at how they promote themselves, what they measure, what the real valid economics lists are that people look at. We worked with professors like Dr. Shivandu and came up with a methodology. How is it different? How is Tampa Scorecard different? Because people say, well, isn't it like the Tampa Bay Partnership one, which Dr. Shivandu helps put together, by the way. Number one, it's Tampa-only data. It's not MSA. So like I said before, sometimes people say Tampa, but they really mean Tampa Bay. This is only Tampa data. It's high-level indicators only. One of the pieces of feedback is, why do you only have 10 indicators instead of 300? You can do 300. I'm on the board of the Florida Chamber Foundation, and we put out the Florida Scorecard, and there are lots and lots of data points there. The thing is, just like with companies, you can look at 300, but what are the top 10 most important ones? What are the ones like profitability that you need to look at, or price per share, profit per share? And we're also looking at outcome instead of output, right? So an output might be we got more ambulances. The outcome would be that we saved more lives, right? It compares Tampa to peer cities. So we looked at the top 6 largest cities in Florida, and only by city again. For each one, we used the same measure. And then we looked also at benchmark cities. And we picked Austin, Charlotte, and Atlanta because those are 3 that have been discussed a lot in the community. We also use, just so you know where the data came from, this is data that's available to anybody. You all can go to the Census Bureau and pull this data yourself right now. And some of it we got from other government data sources like the FBI crime rankings. And it's vetted by top economists, as I mentioned before. So here are the top line indicators that we're looking at. We broke down some of them. Per capita income. Unfortunately, for countries and even states, the top indicator that we would use is the overall economic measure, which is GDP, gross domestic product. There is a gross state product. There's also a gross regional product, but there's no city version of it. And all the top economists I've talked to said that there's no easy way to get the city number. So we have to approximate that. If we had that number, that would be the number one number we would go at. That would be the one like profitability for companies. But we can look at per capita income. We can look at median household income, poverty rate, unemployment rate, home ownership rate, violent crime rate, and educational attainment. This is kind of the consensus from what we looked at. So let's start on the data. By the way, we went back to 2011 with the data. Some of them may be 2012, but mostly 2011. And the reason is that the Great Recession was 2009. And the Great Recession ended in 2009. And so if you count 2010, it may be an anomaly. So we looked at 2011 because that's really the start of the new economic cycle. So we can follow everything. If you look here, by far, Fort Lauderdale has the highest per capita income. And per capita income is where you take all the income of the community divided by the number of people. So every city has different number of population. And if you just look at the income based on the whole population, you get a distorted view because what really counts is how does it affect individual people. So this is per capita. Fort Lauderdale is generally high. One of the strategies for cities is you can get a lot of millionaires and billionaires to come to your city and the numbers can move up. Singapore, which I mentioned a lot, has something like 26 billionaires. But you'll see the other effect of this in a minute. What's interesting here, Tampa is red. And so for most of think about 2011 to 2020 was the greatest economic boom in American history. The whole country boomed. And so, what did Tampa do in relation to that? What we see here is somewhere around 2018, St. Petersburg passed Tampa for the first time. And so Fort Lauderdale's number 1, St. Petersburg's number 2. So there's questions about, what is St. Petersburg doing differently? The rest of them kind of moved in the same direction, although you see Jacksonville drop behind Miami. Then we look at, you look at numerator and denominator. Are there any factors that could throw these numbers off? So we looked at what's the percentage of the population that makes more than 200,000? This measures for the millionaires that are in the community. Tampa has the second highest percentage of them compared to Fort Lauderdale. So you see why, one of the reasons why Fort Lauderdale's per capita income is high is because there's so many wealthy people. And I didn't measure above 10 million, but they're the ultra wealthier in Fort Lauderdale. But what you see there compared to the other peer cities, our percentage is higher. And so that would throw off our per capita income. If we accounted for that, it might make our per capita smaller. So then we look at per capita income compared to our benchmark cities. And what this shows is that Tampa is the red at the bottom. So compared to our benchmark cities like Austin, Charlotte, and Atlanta, they're way ahead of us. Maybe we're the closest to Charlotte, but they're all way ahead of us. But the more interesting thing is look at the trajectory that they're on. Look at the trajectory that that Atlanta is on and Austin. They're going up at a higher angle. They're growing at a faster pace than we are. So that means that we're growing, but not at a fast enough pace. That means that if our goal, for example, was to be the best city in the U.S. based on economic measures, we need to do a lot more to move that number up faster, because we're not only not close to most of our benchmark cities, but we're not moving fast enough. Median household income. So the difference between median and per capita is median looks at the whole household, but it also takes the midpoint of all the range of the different distribution of incomes. And so what this shows is that Fort Lauderdale is on top, as you might have expected from earlier. St. Petersburg is number 2. You look at the gap between Tampa and St. Pete. Tampa's the red and St. Pete is the black. It means that one of our peer cities just in our region is growing at a very rapid rate. You also see that Jacksonville dipped below St. Pete and dipped below Tampa and Orlando in the last few years. So they're not necessarily a city that we want to follow. Median household income compared to the benchmark cities, we see that we're pretty far behind. So it's important to look at numbers in context, because on our own we can say our median income, our per capita income is growing, but when we look at it in context, we see how we're doing compared to everybody else. It's like looking at an individual stock on the stock market compared to the S&P 500 or Dow Jones. Median income disparity between average male and female full-time workers. So this is on average what a man earns versus a woman. So you see in Miami the difference is $5,000. So a man will earn $5,000 more than a woman. But in Tampa it's $9,000, and it's gone up. So Fort Lauderdale is worse than us. Orlando's worse, but this is a number. When I speak to groups of women, they are pretty upset about this number. It's something that we need to address. So then we look at how is it tracked over time. So you see Tampa's the red. We see around 2018, Tampa dipped below Fort Lauderdale. And then also around 2019, dipped below Orlando. So this is a number you want to be in the opposite direction, but so that is good that we dip below those two, because we want that number to go down. But we see the trajectory was going up by 2021, and we needed to go down even further. The best in the state then are Miami and St. Petersburg at addressing the income disparity between men and women. So income disparity between African Americans and Caucasians. So again, what does an average African American earn versus an average white person? Jacksonville, the difference is $14,000. Fort Lauderdale, you see Fort Lauderdale had the highest per capita income, but they have an income disparity of $47,000. But in Tampa, it's $31,000. And you compare just in the Bay Area, again, why is it important to look at the business units instead of just the holding company? The difference between St. Pete and Tampa is $6,000 to $7,000 a year. $25,000 in St. Pete, $32,000 in Tampa. What this shows is that Fort Lauderdale has been worse and consistently worse and is going up. Tampa, though, is the second worst among the 6 major cities in Florida, and the problem is that the trajectory is that it's going up. And so we want it to go in the other direction. We don't want it to go up. Then we look at the middle class. Like, middle class is a measure of effectiveness of economics in the United States. How does the middle class do? You see that Tampa is second to last in terms of percentage of population that's in the middle class. A community cannot survive just on bringing millionaires in. You need to also affect the middle class. You see from 2010 to 2020 was the greatest boom in American history in economics. Tampa's middle class between 2011 and 2016 actually shrank. And then from 2016 it started to grow, but only slightly. It shows we have a lot of work to do. Number 1 for middle class is St. Petersburg at 47%. Percentage of population living in poverty, this number we want to be low. St. Petersburg has the lowest, 12.4%. You see that they've been on a gradual decline. They've obviously, since 2014, had a program to end poverty, although it's popped up a little bit the last year. And look at Tampa. Tampa is the second worst among the 6 major cities. Although it's been declining, it's still higher than our peers. percentage of people living in poverty compared to our benchmark cities. Atlanta is worse than us, but we're not as good as Austin and Charlotte. This is unemployment rate. There are different ways of looking at unemployment rate, and this number goes up and down. This was as of 2021. What it shows, just trending over time, St. Petersburg has the best unemployment rate. Look there, the black line on the bottom, and then their unemployment rate was going down. That typically happens when you're in a good booming economy. Anything below 5% is considered excellent. In fact, it's maybe too much because then it causes inflation, as we're seeing now. But Tampa in the last 2 years has now gone to tied with number 3. So we're in the middle of the pack there, which shows we're at least moving in the right direction. Home ownership rate. Home ownership rate is just like middle class, is a sign of building intergenerational wealth. I put Singapore in because they have a unique program that we can't copy, but theirs is 92%. St. Petersburg has the best among our peer cities, almost 63%, and we're at 50%. We're in the middle of the pack. And that number is higher than it was, but we need to obviously work on that. You look at the trend over time. St. Petersburg, starting in 2016, surpassed Jacksonville, and now by far is the highest among our peer cities in the state. Again, we're in the middle of the pack. We've consistently been there. We're not really moving up. We're just moving sideways. In fact, from 2011 to 2019, again, the biggest boom in American history, our homeownership rate went down. This one I spent a lot of time on in the last few days, and thank you to Chief Burkall and Chief Bennett for helping me with this, despite the storm. This chart is actually from the FBI list. The page actually creates this chart, and we went back and forth about it. Chief Burkall has the updated numbers for 2021 and 2022. They submitted it to the state. The state did not submit it in time, and so it's not included in the FBI charts, and I only want to show the actual FBI chart. It's pretty consistent, so it kind of stayed the same or popped up slightly. But what it shows is a spike over the last couple of years in the violent crime rate. Now, when you look at statistics, you can present statistics that make it look good or make it look bad. This chart, if you look at it by itself, would make it look bad, and there are lots of theories on why this happened, and Chief Burkall will come talk to us at a future point about his perspectives on this. If you compare this to the home ownership rate, the disparity rates, the poverty rate, you can see a correlation there as well. But look at the next page. This is why context matters. If you compare this to our peer cities in Florida, on a per 100,000 basis, we're the best in the state. So again, you look at this chart, you think we're doing a terrible job. You look at this chart and you think we're doing a great job. So again, it depends on how you present statistics. But we went back and forth with them, and they gave me approval to show these. By the way, there are two different sets of statistics they show. One is to the National Chiefs Organization, and one is to the FBI. I use the FBI. This is just the percentage of people that have a bachelor's degree, and we're highest among our peers in the state, which is a good sign. But compared to our benchmarks, we're the lowest. Michael Porter, many of you may have heard of, wrote the book on competitive strategy and competitive advantage from Harvard Business School, and also competitive advantage of nations, competitive advantage of the inner city. And what he talks about is the difference between price and differentiation. Consumers tend to be more price sensitive if they are purchasing products that are undifferentiated, where quality is not particularly important to them. Strategy is about making choices. It's about deliberately choosing to be different. If somebody came to you with a BMW, a brand new BMW, and said, I'm going to charge you $10,000, you would probably question why. So would you rather be selling something that's high quality and where you can charge more, or would you rather charge less and compete on price? You all know from the hundreds of emails we've gotten about the tax increase, people are suffering right now. They don't think that Tampa is a cheap place to live. This is a screenshot from the EDC from Saturday, just this past Saturday. This is their homepage. You can go to it right now. It probably shows this. But on their homepage, they're selling us based on price. So at the very top of their page, it says cost of living in Tampa Bay, and you calculate how much cheaper it is to live here. And then the line underneath says, Florida, #2 best state for taxpayer ROI. The point is that if we want to sell ourselves, we can't sell ourselves based on price anymore. We need to sell ourselves based on differentiation. That's how we're going to be successful in the future. Moaz, I included this quote from last time, but he said, the Amazons of the world go beyond their rankings and rhetoric. They look at the facts, and they know the facts better than we do. After I presented the last time, I went to a friend of mine who's in commercial real estate, and he said, why are you presenting numbers, some of which are negative about Tampa? And I said, because we need to face the real numbers. And I said, when you look at your clients that are thinking about moving to Tampa, do they look at their real numbers, or do they look at the numbers that are presented to them by the EDC and other organizations? And he said, well, they have very sophisticated metrics. They look at all the census data and other data. And I said, well, that means they're seeing the real data. The companies that are looking to invest here, the people that are looking to live here, they don't just see the stuff we're presenting in marketing. They look at the real data. They see the disparities between blacks and whites. They see the disparities between men and women. They see the low home ownership rate. And they look at those factors to decide whether they want to live here or stay here. And some of the people that moved here in the last few years because of COVID, they're thinking about whether they should stay or not. The point is that we need to be honest about our numbers. We need to address the issues that we need to, and we need to figure out how to do better in the future. Conclusions: Tampa's policy and economic development efforts need to be focused on reducing poverty and growing the middle class. We need to use an honest scorecard to measure where we are going and where we want to go. In terms of next steps, we need to further define the scorecard and goals. We need to get more community input. We need predictive analytics, and that's what Dr. Shivandu and his team. USF has said, we'll give you a whole team of data analytics people. We'll help you figure out how to solve these problems. For free, we'll help work with you. And we need to engage them, and we need a plan. So following the last time I presented, we City Council recommended creating an economic advisory committee. And I negotiated with USF. I got Michael Bloom and Moaz Limiam from USF to volunteer to lead the program. Dr. Shivandu presented the data. We put together a committee of 24 people, diverse committee from throughout the city. They met 6 times to look at the data and figure out what we should do next. And the mayor was so excited, she said, I'll run it. And so they ran it, and there's a whole plan that's at tampa.gov/T3-economic. Anybody can look at. But here are the 4 things that they came up with. Promote inclusive economic growth, reduce poverty, commit to racial equity, and emphasize educational opportunities. So my suggestion to you all is that the administration runs many of the programs within the city, and they have many levers that they can pull. But this is now also up to us. We all are involved in the community as volunteers. We're policymakers. We can support budget priorities. We can support initiatives, especially through the CRAs. And so really, it's up to us to try to figure out, do we want to address these numbers and how? So thank you.
That was a wonderful presentation. I appreciate all your hard work and everybody that took part in it. You bring up a lot of very good points. First and foremost, why is there income inequality? Why is a man earning more than a woman doing the same job? I never understood that, and I just think that's unfair and wrong. I'm glad to see a lot of positive mentions here in regards to bachelor's degrees. The crime rate going down, even though it showed an increase in 2020, we've had almost 1,000 days since. So I'm not asking you, but I'd like to see how we've fared since 2020. Now that we're approaching the end of 2023, to see if we're making any improvements or if it's going up. On the last page, the one that's right after this, it shows per capita income, Tampa at 40,000 and Naples at 126. I mean, Naples, as I know it, is a lot of wealth, a lot of retirees, and same with labor.
You mean Fort Lauderdale, right?
Huh?
Fort Lauderdale, Naples isn't on here.
Yeah, it's on the last one. Yeah.
Oh, in the back. Okay.
Yeah, it says best city in Florida, Naples.
Yeah. So there's. Go ahead, sir.
There's a lot of wealth down there. It's like saying, Los Angeles, but Beverly Hills has, the unemployment is the lowest and the per capita income. So, that's.
This is a chart this is after the presentation, just some extra data. This is a chart that we put together to say, what's the best in Florida, not just peer cities, what's the best? Yeah. And obviously these are outliers, but it's just interesting to look at it.
Yeah. No, but I think great presentation. This is very informative. You've done a lot of the research and given a lot of the data and shown where we need to improve. And I like where the City of Tampa website shows under the T3 under economic the 4 points there. So I'll stop there. Councilwoman Hurtak, I saw your hand up.
Thank you. Actually, if you could go back to the top four. Yeah. So it's really fascinating because you're everything you were going to, and thank you so much for this because I, like you, really love data and the exact data. The more data, the better. And when we're looking at MSA, which I believe is Metropolitan Statistical Area, just for people who don't know what that is, we are including people, or we're including cities that aren't ours, and so that's very difficult for us to really stop and think about where we need to improve. And so what I think is really interesting about 1, 2, 3, and 4 is it dances around the issue that we have 50% homeownership in this city. And if we really want to improve reducing poverty, promoting inclusive economic, all of these things are tied to housing. And housing is not on here. And so I just want to challenge my colleagues to look at this in terms of housing. And again, I appreciate these numbers, but I really like your next slide best. It's up to us. And we actually have to do the work now.
You just like that slide because that good-looking guy sitting next to you.
You're talking about me? No, just kidding.
Touche.
So if you go to that report, the T3 economic report, this is the top 4 items, and there's a lot of detail underneath it. There were 6 meetings of this group, 24 people throughout the community, and it tells all the details in there. USF led it. The mayor was the chair of it. That is the feedback they gave. We can take that feedback and we can implement ourselves, or we can do our own thing. That's why Dr. Shivandu is here also. We can have a separate conversation with him another time, or you all can meet with him individually. But he can tell us exactly what we need to do to move these numbers. Home ownership rate seems easy to understand, but how do you move things like per capita income? There's a whole team, that one of the best teams in the world at USF that does this, and they're willing to do it for us for free if we want.
And again, I think it's a fabulous idea to have them come and talk to us. But what I've been doing in my research on housing is finding that it actually does. When you own a home, by and large, you know what your costs are going to be for a year. They go up generally. This year's an anomaly because of insurance, but you can calculate what your increase is going to be. Therefore, you have more money to put into things like education. You can focus on getting a better job. You are not focusing on just paying your rent. And so I think that getting someone to talk to us about all of these issues is wonderful. I would love to know where to go next. And now that we're having this conversation about budget, where is the best place to put our money? I know you had this on the agenda for several months ago, and I think in the future we should start this conversation a lot earlier. But I'm really looking forward. Maybe we can start this conversation and have someone come to, I at least want to start having this conversation, but I think as we've found, as a body, we've done really well when we've kind of opened up these ideas and started to talk about them amongst ourselves, since we're not allowed to do it anywhere but on this dais. So I would love, if no one else wants to schedule a time for these USF and other folks to come and really dig in with us on the things we can do to move the needle to make a difference.
One thing, if you look at this chart, you see, again, during the biggest boom in economic boom in American history, Tampa's home ownership rate went down. And then it's only come up in the last couple of years, but only slightly, and it's been flat pretty much the whole time. And so one of the excuses might be, well, Tampa had a lot of millennials move in, or had a lot of, and people want to rent. But St. Peter's is also a place that's had a lot of millennials and Generation Z move in, and their home ownership rate has skyrocketed, and they're doing really well at it. And so we need to figure out, what we need to do to help people move into longer term investments.
And I will say that one thing St. Pete has that we don't is a lot of missing middle housing.
Councilman Miranda, Councilman Vieira.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. It's time in life of 10 years. But even in the last slide with the ownership, I don't see any rate that went up. When you look at the black line, that St. Peter was 64, now it's 62.7. I see the yellow line, which is Jacksonville, was at 60 plus. It went down to 56. I see Tampa in red from 53, 54, maybe 55% down to 50. I see the green line, which is Orlando, went up from 40-some% down to 38. I see the purple line, which is Miami, went down from 35% down to 30. So we're all in the same bunch. I mean, you can look at it any way anybody wants to. When I look at the unemployment rate, St. Pete was at 6, went down to 3. Tampa was at 7, went down to 3.5. When you do the math, it's 50%. Any way you look at it, they went down 50%, and so did the city of Tampa, which is a positive in this point. They were at 6%, went down to 3. We were at 7, went down to 3.5. So I tried to calculate this all in my mind. I couldn't remember all the charts. But if you do an analytical study of where we really come from the old days of cigar making, an American can, Reynolds can, an aluminum can, guess what you find in Tampa? From the 70s or the 60s to now, we have been the most progressive. When I was a kid in Tampa, the tallest building was the Floridan Hotel. There was no area on the west of us, east of us, none. There was La Draga, which means the area where nobody wanted to live. There was no Arbor Highland, there was nothing. It was Staten Island with all the citrus nitrate would blow over, and the old people and good people in Davis Island would be all white. No matter what kind of car you had, it was white for a long time. So we have come in such a long way, and I'm not saying it's negative. I'm saying that I can read the facts, but the principal numbers that I see, even here, when you look at it, you look at any one green, and it all went down, and let me look at St. Pete again, make sure I didn't make a mistake, because I was just reading it. Yeah, they were at 6, went down to 3, and Tampa was at 7, if I recall. Tampa is what number? Red, and they went down to 3.5. So there is no dispute. We both went down, but we went down to equal amount, 50%. I do not, tell me one individual that you see it anywhere in the city, or anywhere in the state, or anywhere in the nation, and they ask you, where do you live? You'll never say, I live in Tampa Bay. They'll laugh at you. That's a body of water. None says that. I'm not questioning you, I'm questioning what I see the people tell me. They don't live in Tampa Bay, they live in the city of Tampa. Tampa, and I like to sit down with these professors that go back to the 70s, let them tell me where we come up. There was no downtown. There was 600 people. 6 were looking for a job, and 54 were in jail. That's how it was when I got elected. There was no buildings here. Bill Poe in 1976 or 77 started the process here across the street, and it became the first spurt. All those mayors that I ever had a chance of working with did something to make it where we're at today. And I'm not questioning you, believe me, I appreciate what you're doing. I really do, because it energizes all of us. But when I see all these things, and I see things you got to look at that nobody talks about, there's only 2 water departments in the state of Florida that has a AAA rating. And Tampa's one of them. There's only 13 in the whole country of the United States of America. 13, and Tampa's one of them. So these are things that are not on this chart. These are things that create the opportunities to come live here. This is not to tell you, if you go back to the statistics about education and the way living and the poverty rate, how many people lived in the housing projects, how many people did that, to where they're at today, Tampa blows their door down. And St. Pete has always been a little bit better. Fort Lauderdale, Miami used to be what everybody wanted to be at one time. Not anymore. They're going there. But what happened to Miami and that Fort Lauderdale area is they had an enormous influx of people from other countries that came in and really stuck in and really made it grow, because they brought more and more growth, more and more families. Tampa had that back in the 20s and the 30s, and they still have that to some degree. But I'm not disappointed. I knew when the figures started coming out in my mind, I was calculating right quick the math, and when you look at where we were and where we're at compared to everybody else, if we're behind, we're not that far behind. But thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, sir. I just wanted to thank you for your obvious hard work and your passion. This takes a lot of hard work and a lot of passion. You know, one of the things that I think really troubles people in the city of Tampa is the new reality which is with, inflation, 7.5% inflation in the Tampa area, et cetera, people going, is this the new reality for Tampa? And I think that the real issue before us, a lot of people here say, don't New York my Tampa, which I always think is a misguided statement. I think the real way to say it is don't Miami my Tampa. Nothing wrong with the good people of Miami. You've had a lot of family members live there, et cetera, but which is that mass concentration of wealth, the smaller middle class, et cetera, those types of issues we're seeing more and more happen in Tampa, especially because of inflation and the rising cost of living here. You look at some issues, I think we've done the city's done a good job over the last few years. Take a look at housing, pushing 30% of CRA funds and all CRAs into affordable housing. That's a revolutionary move. As well as the things that we've done in the general budget and with federal help through training, obviously a lot of different things through apprenticeships and whatnot. One of the issues where we really haven't moved the needle to where I think we should, and I think we all agree with this, and we've been disappointed in this again and again and again, is transportation and the loss of that penny sales tax and what that would do to really, really moving us ahead as a community here in the city of Tampa with connectivity and with helping with upward mobility and different issues like that. But again, I think the real big thing that Tampa folks are asking themselves is this the new reality for us? These high housing costs, inflation, et cetera, here in the city of Tampa, because what it serves to do is to make the middle class more and more squeezed, make it harder to get into the middle class, make living in the working class in the blue collar area much tougher, and make for marginalized communities even more marginalized. And we have to serve as a rebuttal to that. But I just wanted to thank you for your statistics. That took a lot of hard work to put that in. That's almost like a trial exhibit in a jury trial. So it took a lot of hard work and passion, and thank you, sir.
Anybody else? Councilman Henderson, Councilman Clinton. All right. Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson, or Councilman Carlson. That really was a very good presentation. A couple of things. One, statistics, and the presenter. I know, and it's difficult. I don't know what the challenges are and what the answer is, but I know it's very difficult to compare us to Miami-Dade because it's countywide. And, it's a very, very, very different issue comparing a countywide and something as complex as Miami-Dade to the geographical context of the city of Tampa. Jacksonville, kind of the same way. It's a countywide. Could you break it down into the core part of the city and compare maybe, but it's very difficult to do that. Some interesting things that I heard, and I'm in agreement with Councilwoman Hurtek about the housing thing, but I think our solutions are different from I assume. Because I think the home ownership is a critical element of this. And what I've seen in the policies in this council and past councils and administrations is we've lost sight on what it means, what home ownership really means to people. And I think Councilman Hurtek captured it perfectly as far as the predictability, of course, adding in generational wealth. But I think some of the things that we've been doing have been counterproductive and counterintuitive to that. And I really like your statement. I'm going to plagiarize the heck out of it, the outcome versus output. And I think that is such an important thing in every decision we make. And it kind of plays on what Councilman Vieira said, but in a contrary way, on like that 30%. What's the outcome versus output? What is the output of getting that versus if we were to use that money for transportation, how many lives would we be able to impact? If we were able to sunset downtown and take that money and build affordable housing somewhere else, what's the output? How many more lives could we input? So how many people are we actually taking care of as opposed to just shifting money on a balance sheet and then patting ourselves on the back? So a lot of these policies, when we were talking about home ownership in this budget and discussions, I'm going to keep hitting on this. I think that the city of Tampa needs to go back to what was the Mayor's Challenge Fund, which was encouraging. It kept people in houses, senior citizens going in and helping repair houses to make sure that they don't lose their homes. Folks that are in jeopardy of losing their homes, getting in and giving them that little bit of a hand up, not a handout, but a hand up. And of course, providing opportunities for people to be first-time home buyers. And back then, it was with our first responders and school teachers. I think, as Councilwoman Henderson knows, it's an important program for people. And I think we should really instead of doing some of the direction where all of a sudden we've kind of shifted in one way, I think we should go back, everything is old is new again, and relook at that and really evaluate that based on these policies that we're pushing today. You know, one real positive thing was the education information that you provided, and I think that's a really good future indicator for the city of Tampa, because you know a lot of these folks, we know a lot of young people, highly educated people are moving to the city of Tampa, and they've got income growth in front of them, not behind them. So I think that's going to be a good future indicator for us. Our weakest links in Tampa, based on my assessment of where we are right now, and one of it's almost out of our control, and that's our public education system. I mean, people have to realize the racial inequity, the income disparity in the city of Tampa. You know, you're not fixing that in college, you're fixing it in preschool and kindergarten, and we have to do something about the inequity in our public schools. Again, it's not something that the person sitting to the left or right of me up here really have a lot of say in, but we have friends, and everybody that's listening to this is a voter and to talk to the people that represent their city, both at the county level and most specifically at the state level, of fix our damn public education system. And that will go a long way to fixing the inequities and the income disparities in our country. Transportation, thank you, Councilman Vieira. I'm a transportation guy, because people are not going to move to the city if we don't fix our transportation problems. And that's getting people from point A to point B, and it's also fixing our roads, fixing our sidewalks, making this a decent place to live, continuing. We can't let it continue to decline and erode. We've got to do something, because you let the city crumble around us, none of these numbers are going to matter in 10 or 15 years if people come here and it looks like we're a third world country. Thank you.
Councilwoman Henderson.
Good morning, Councilman Carlson. Thank you so much for your scorecard presentation. I can hear your passion about this very topic, and data is important. We look at data in education to drive progress in students. We have to do that for our cities as well. So I just wanted to say that it is also very timely that we're having this conversation about the scorecard as it relates to the fact that we're actually in budget season. If you go back to your second to last slide, right before our picture, I think that'll give me a better visual of the four things that we, right there. Yes, promoting inclusive economic growth, reducing poverty, committing to racial equity, and of course, emphasizing educational opportunities. That right there really falls in line with, if you look at and consider the budget presentation that was presented to us by staff, there are so many opportunities for us with the millage to actually put a dent in these very things right here. I know Mintiz Knight, also Tony Daniels sitting in the office, in the audience, he talks about reparations all the time, every time he comes to council. And so maybe that's not the exact word that I would use, but there are opportunities within the budget for us to provide better housing opportunities, as well as improving our parks. And all of these kind of things that are presented in the current budget, presented by staff, is an opportunity for us to put a dent in some of these things, particularly when it comes to housing. The Challenge Fund, which Councilman Clendenin just mentioned, is something that I was a part of. The Challenge Fund, I talked about it on the campaign trail. It was a wonderful program for me as a first-time home buyer and a single parent. It actually built equity, you know, being able to choose a house in Tampa Heights, which I actually could not afford today if I wanted to buy a house in Tampa Heights. And so we do have to take advantage of these opportunities, and the budget, what was presented by Nicole Travis, and the impact that it can have on CRA is very important, and I think that we should consider that. I think that you should reconsider it, since you don't support the budget. Also, the current budget that's presented by staff with the millage increase. But one of the things too is that it wasn't clearly stated, but the equal business opportunity division of our city, there is a lot of opportunity there to promote inclusive economic growth. We have an opportunity to improve that department in a way where we are analyzing every single contract that comes into this city. That is an opportunity to bring about inclusive economic growth. And so the other thing that I wanted to say too, even regarding the bachelor's degrees, we have an opportunity in this city to, yes, because we have, an improvement in students earning bachelor's degrees, we also want them to come back home. So therefore, we need to create opportunities for them to want to be here. I went off to Atlanta. I was ready to go to Atlanta because I thought that there would be better opportunities for me there, especially as an African-American woman, before coming back to Tampa, when Tampa was paying $18,900, which is about $9 an hour for teachers in 1986 when I graduated from college, versus in Atlanta, they were already making about $28,000 versus almost 19. So there was this huge disparity in salaries. And so there's just so many opportunities that we have to address. I really appreciate that last slide as it relates to the areas that we can improve. You put up our picture to say that it's up to us. So that is a driving force for me. It is even more motivation to look at these 4 items based on the scorecard that you've presented to us to make an impact right here on the dais. So thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Could I get, just Dr. Chevenu, do you have any, since we didn't ask you to speak, could you just give us 30 seconds of any final thought you have?
Thank you very much. I think it was a very good presentation. A lot of new points came up. And in many ways, the work that we do for the state of the region kind of is aligned with the numbers that you presented. Obviously, one of the things that you pointed out, we look at the MSA level and we don't look at the city level. And I think your scorecard is one of the very few scorecards which are at the city level. So I must compliment you for all the effort that you have put in. Your research team is a great work. The only thing that I would like to add here is that at USF in our team, what we do, as you may have seen in some of the presentations that we make, is also to not only talk about the facts, but we also go behind those facts and try to figure out what leads to those facts. That means what are the drivers of poverty rate? What are the drivers of housing ownership rates? What are the drivers of median income disparity between different racial groups within the population? And then from there, we try to pick out those action areas where the policymakers can take some action to change the facts. So we go behind those things to drive the causal relationships between what we observe in facts and what is behind them. What are the inputs that need to be put in order to change the outcomes? And obviously, predictive analytics is one of the things that we take pride that we are very good at it, and we have been doing it both in our presentations that we make and also as a focus within Mumma College of Business. Predictive analytics is one of the big things that we take pride that we are leaders in the country in terms of methods and the capabilities that are within the college in which we impart to our students. So thank you very much, and I'll be more than happy, me and my team, and I think the Mumma College of Business and USF, to help city in any ways which can kind of increase the competitiveness of our city compared to other cities in terms of lower poverty rates, in terms of lower disparities, etc. So thank you very much, and please count us in any effort that you all decide where we can be of any help. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your help. And if any of you would like his contact information, you can get it from me or my legislative aide. One last thing, imagine you have a kid that has on the report card 2 A's, a B, and 2 C's. And they're doing great, but you want them to get all A's. And so there are some A's here, there's some B's, and there's some C's. We just want to make sure we make all A's. We want to be a straight A city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, I actually wanted to bring up one more thing. As I was listening to him speak and listening to the fellow council members, I think it's very interesting that we are #1 in degrees, but yeah, we're low in pay and low in home ownership. So what that tells me is that people with degrees aren't maximizing their potential here. And that is something that we see And I'll be honest, the work I do overseas in very impoverished countries, people have wonderful degrees, but no jobs in which to use those degrees. So I'd be very interested to see what the correlation is between degrees and whether or not people are working in their fields. And if so, are we getting people who are getting degrees in things where the salaries are very low? So I would really love USF to come and talk to us about those disparities, because if we have if we have such a high education, why don't we have the salaries that match?
Councilman Miranda, Councilman Clinton.
Well, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, I admit to that, but I think there's two reasons. First of all, the kids that are born and raised in Tampa, coming home and staying in Tampa, wherever you went to college, they want to come back because Tampa's a growing city. What the kids need, they want to have their lifestyle and the mannerism that they choose. That's number one. And number two, the kids that come from other places, University of Tampa went now, University of Tampa in attendance now is larger than Wake Forest and Princeton's in attendance. Something you never heard of, but look at it, where it's at. Most of those kids now want to stay here because they like the ambience, they like the city, they like the environment, they like everything. So that's the answer, and until time catches up, at first we didn't have any graduates to speak of. Now we have a lot of graduates, and now we never used to have a tech company in Tampa, never. Now there's competition in tech company to come to Tampa. So as I read anyway, so I think in the next 5 years that'll level up, and that's my opinion. It certainly could be challenged at any time, but I just feel that the kids are staying because they realize that the future is here.
Yes, sir.
You know, it just dawned on me in this discussion, and I got caught in the same trap that I hate other people getting caught in, is what's missing in here is our trades. And the comparison, how we're doing in skilled labor, because we are a major port city, and it'd be interesting to see one, and I know it's very important to you as well, making sure that we don't lose those high-paying, skilled occupations that aren't necessarily a correlation with higher education. So I think that may be something to expand and look at, is how do we retain our industry and our manufacturing and our hard-skilled labor forces in the city of Tampa. I think it's an important economic driver and an important element. I think we need to make sure that we keep that in mind as we're looking at, when we're measuring the city of Tampa. And again, I want to make sure I emphasize this. A good job on this. It was very informative, very interesting, and I think it was a very well done presentation.
So just like with companies, if a goal is profit, you look at within the company to figure out what are the things we need to do to make a profit, but you measure the outcome and profit. And it's the same thing here. We've got the outcome measures. We want to reduce poverty. We want to increase home ownership rate. We want to increase per capita income, median household income. And beneath that, there's a whole bunch of things like transportation and the different styles of work, the different occupations. But that's what Dr. Shivandu's department can do. They can tell us, here are the things that we see with real data that will have the inputs to these numbers and the real things that we can do to move the needle faster on these numbers. What are the things we can do short-term and long-term to figure out how to move the needle? But we should always be focused on something like per capita income and household income and the disparities. And anybody looking at this, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, there are all different kinds of solutions across the spectrum. Anything from subsidies to, for housing or whatever to increasing incentives for the private sector and increasing entrepreneurship. There are all kinds of solutions, but what I look forward to is us talking to the public and ourselves about what the solutions can be going forward.
Thank you very much.